Yeah, sin messes things up. If you flip over to chapter 3, you'll see in chapter 3 that basically mankind had been given everything. God had built everything perfectly for Adam and Eve to exist in. There was no sin, no mess-ups yet, and everything was at their disposal. But then, in that chapter 3, this little snake slithers up to the woman and starts talking mess in her ear. And the woman decides to serve herself. And instead of honoring God with what He had pre-intended, His plan, His perfection, she went off the ranch. I've talked about it a ton here. It's the source of every mess in everyone's life. This ingrained, hereditary issue that we all face. It's called sin. It's the worship of self over God. Well, when she decided to do that, she, of course, got her husband involved. And Adam, being the strong one, said, okay. And when he did, well, that brought about a new dynamic. We'll see if I get this right. In a world where this was foreign, not even known, sin that is, Adam and Eve chose to go off the grid and basically defy God. And because they did, what they got was familial dishonor. Did you see what happened in the garden as soon as God found them out? Did you see that in chapter 3? If you're there, read it. God comes to them, and what happens as soon as He says, what have you been doing? Adam says, this woman you gave me made me mess up. Right? Did he honor his wife there? No, he pointed the finger of blame right at her, right? Well, the woman wasn't going to be outdone. Well, this snake came up to me and told me to eat the fruit. And so began the family way of nobody taking responsibility for the problem. Sin brought that. Now, flip over to the next chapter, chapter 4. Adam and Eve followed God's commands. They did procreate. They made a couple kids named Cain and Abel. These are handy little fellas. They're hanging out, and now they have this selfish, sinful DNA in them. And it plays out in their relationship. They both go to give God the worship that He's due. But Cain kind of did a half-hearted effort. He brought some of his produce from his farming. It wasn't his very best, but he brought it anyway. Abel, on the other hand, brought his very best from his flock. Kind of a precursor to the whole sacrificial system that would unfold in the Old Testament. He brought the very best sacrifice to his God, and God was pleased with it. Now, I know this doesn't happen in our families, but the siblings fell into something that we call a sibling rivalry. The one was jealous of the other, bitter against the other. Bitter enough, my friends, that in the first family of all history, we have the first murder of all history. God saw it coming. He came to Cain and He said, Cain, buddy, be careful, man. There's some bad stuff knocking at your door. But Cain, he just said, nah, I'm good. Anybody ever done that when God's talked to you in some of your family messes? God, I know you're probably right, but I'm so angry right now, it's going to feel so much better for me to swing. Or for me to say. And so we do. And what do we get? Dishonor in our families. Yeah, Cain took Abel out for a walk in the field. Come on, buddy. And once they got out there, he killed his own brother. Have you ever felt like you've been on the end of someone else's club in your family? On the receiving end of murderous and malicious intent? Have you been hurt by the actions of your spouse, the defiance of your children, the rejection of your parents? Well, if you have, kind of weed through the rubble, scrape back all the layers of pain, and you're going to get down to exactly what we get down to here in the book of Genesis. Someone in the mix chose themselves, loving themselves over loving their family. And when they chose that, they brought dishonor, pain, hurt into that family situation. When dishonor comes into the family situation, God, being a just God, doesn't just kind of let it dangle out there. He determines that where there is no justice, then there will be the absence of something that we all long for. Everybody's heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Did you know that there's a spiritual hierarchy of needs? That we were created to be in perfect union with a perfect God. But when we choose self, which breeds dishonor, this perfect union is broken. And where that perfect union is broken, where that separation exists, there can be, and there will be, no peace. Keep reading in the book of Genesis and you'll get to the end. And you'll read about another family. It's the family of Jacob, who would later be called Israel. And Jacob's sons were kind of, descendants or chips off the old block, as it were, of Adam and Eve's sons. It all started when Jacob, or in a bad mistake, he basically chose one of his sons, Joseph, as his favorite. Any parent ever done that in here? Did that create a joyous atmosphere for the other kids to grow up in? Were you one of the other kids growing up in that house? Wasn't that fun? To know that you just weren't quite as good enough as your brother? What a joy that must have been for you. Yeah, these other brothers who were older and by right should have been esteemed higher were not. And this son Joseph, he was the favorite, and he was given this great coat. He went to his brothers one day and he bragged about how one day he had this dream. One day you're going to bow down before me, and that, my friends, was it. Self took over in the hearts of all those brothers. They hated him so bad that they wanted to do a sequel to Cain and Abel. Kill your brother part 2. There was one brother who had enough decency in him to say, no, let's just throw him in a hole. That'll teach him a lesson. So they threw him in a hole. And he had every intention to come back and rescue him out of that hole once his brothers had settled down. But he left, and he didn't have a chance to come back and do that because his brother's still angry, still foaming at the mouth for their brother's blood. He said, you know what, if we can't kill him, let's fake his murder. Let's sell him into slavery. That'll learn him. And so that's what they did. Selfishness bred this rivalry, which led to dishonor, which led to the sale of their brother as a slave. And can you imagine Thanksgiving in that house from then on? Can you picture it? Dad at the one end, mom's at the other end, and then down the sides are all the brothers' chairs, except one that's empty down in the corner, right next to Dad. And as they hold the hands to cut the turkey, that didn't really happen, right? As they're holding the hands to cut the turkey, the dad says a prayer that once again laments the loss of his favorite son. And under the table, the older brothers who had sold this dude into slavery and faked his death to their father kick each other.